So first of all, I want to go through real quickly before we start anything to make sure we're all on the same page. I am using the term glamour in a very technical way. And that is, I mean glamour as a delusion that occurs at the level of consciousness, at the level of being, in which cognition is mixed with emotion. And this is particularly important because for the vast majority of humans, this is where the main action of play is. This is our playing field as humanity, that we sometimes are aware on other aspects of being, but this is where the vast majority of us spend most of our time. And it's sometimes called the concrete mind, but it's also that place, like I said, where cognition is mixed with emotion. And that also is very important to us individually in terms of how we conceive of ourselves in terms of our identity. It's often at that level of being. So this is a very important place in terms of the type of level of being where humanity has a lot of its emphasis and power, and therefore something that is a delusion at that level has particular potency. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page generally about what we're talking about before I go further. So I have been a theosophist since 1999. Now, I actually was reading a lot of theosophical literature earlier than that, in the 80s and early 90s, before I discovered the National Capital Lodge of the Theosophical Society in Washington, D.C., that I've been a member of ever since. In addition, as he mentioned, I am an eclectic Wiccan high priestess of Theophania, which is a coven in the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel. And the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel is essentially, like, you can think of it as a denomination, if you will, of Wicca. And I began practicing Wicca in the mid-80s. And I am specifically devoted to Apollon, Apollo, the Lord of Light, and Athena, but I have strong relationships that I believe I brought into this incarnation with a number of the ancient Hellenic theoi. Now, another piece that I want to mention here that is very important is that a text that I have been working with for a very long time at this point, that I owe a lot of, I need to acknowledge as being very influential on my thinking about this topic, is Glamour, A World Problem by Alice Bailey. So first of all, I want to recommend that book to anyone who is interested in exploring these ideas further, Glamour, A World Problem. And I have been studying it for a very long time. But in addition to that, I've really been working with it in trying to take the concepts that are in that text, understand them within the framework of my understanding of occult philosophy, of the way in which magic works, and how to operationalize it within my own spiritual practice. And then also as someone who does work on designing rituals, how to take all of that from my personal work and create structures such as ritual structures that we can work on collectively. Today, we're going to be doing a ritual that is adapted from group rituals that I have now led in numerous groups in different settings and working on different glamours. So all of that is to say, I am highly indebted to Alice Bailey's work. But also what you're getting through this is my take on it in attempting to operationalize it. So you might find someone else who is also a very deep student of Alice Bailey who might have a different kind of take on it because they're operationalizing it in a different way. So I just wanted to give you a little bit about that. So I'm deeply indebted, but you're also getting my take on things and my attempt to understand it within the context of somebody who practices magic. So I always like to think through, as I'm designing these things, my learning objectives. You will be able to understand what a glamour is, identify a glamour when you encounter one. When you see something, you're like, oh, wait, that's a glamour. So that's part of it, because then you should be able to analyze a glamour, including analyzing what is feeding it, because that's very important for the next thing, which is you will be able to create a strategy for breaking a glamour. And then, as I said, part of giving you this ritual outline is you can use this if you are someone who likes to do individual ritual, or you can do this in a meditative state. So you will be able to use a ritual or meditation to work on dissipating a personal glamour. And you will have the ability to take the ritual that I'm giving you and work on dissipating a collective glamour as an act of service individually, or if you want to take it to a ritual working group. So let's spend a little bit more time here talking about what is a glamour. So as I said, a glamour is a delusion that occurs at the level of consciousness in which cognition is mixed with emotion. And that is incredibly important because it is at that level of self in which it is the major place of action for all of humanity. Glamours are particularly noxious. They're particularly problematic because part of what they do is they offer people an illusion of power while simultaneously stripping them of their actual power. That's one of the hallmarks that I see in a glamour. And another aspect about them, and you'll start to see why when we go through some of the theory here, they tend to have kind of an entrapping mechanism with that. So there's an old phrase of being enthralled to a glamour. And to be enthralled is essentially to be enslaved. There is something about them that takes your will and blocks you. And it also tends to obscure the alternatives and obscure the fact that it exists. So those are all some hallmarks of a glamour. Now, as I mentioned in Alice Bailey's material, Glamour, A World Problem, she names the work of an occultist as to dispel illusion, to dissipate glamour, to devitalize Maya, and to destroy the dweller on the threshold. You know, they're all very, very important topics, and they happen at different levels of being. But this issue of glamour, as I said, is particularly important. And why I'm focusing there is because that really is where most humans are active and therefore is a particularly big problem for humans. So I do want to talk a little bit more about why this topic. And this has to do with my understanding of spiritual evolution. And what I mean by that is I believe that all of us are on a quest to evolve on all levels of our being, and that collectively we are also learning, living, and growing and evolving on all levels of being. And it is particularly important, I think, to understand this because one of the big things that I'm always looking for is what are those patterns? What are those obstacles that are in the way of our evolution? What are the things that are counter-evolutionary forces? And to try to understand what the big trajectory of evolution is, individually and as a society, as a species, you have to step back and try to see things from the perspective of the immortal self. And a large part of that is looking at things in a different time span. It's looking at things in 100, 200-year increments, not just what's happening right now over, this next year, this next cycle like that. And part of what we're looking at is, in general, the general trajectory is towards a deeper participation in unity as consciousness and things that allow us to fully unfold on all levels of our being. That's a large part of what the general trajectory is. So when I step back and I try to look at things from that perspective, part of what I see is that humanity as a whole, the group soul of humanity, I believe is on the cusp of an initiatory challenge. And what I see is I believe as a whole, as the group soul of our whole species, we are on the threshold of a coming of age crisis. That is the big initiatory challenge that I see. That we are in this moment where we are essentially, as a whole, spiritual teenagers, and our job is to become full spiritual adults. And if you are like me and you can recall your own teenagedom and think, oh, that was an interesting time. Or if you look at teenagers, that's a very difficult transition to make. And it doesn't go smoothly and it doesn't always succeed. So I think that's why everything right now feels as intense as it does, because this is a very, very big, important challenge. The other thing about evolution, and I believe this is true in spiritual evolution as well, is it's not necessarily just a gradual change. I see it in terms of punctuated equilibrium. And typically what this means, and in initiatory traditions, we do this intentionally, there's these moments in which you have crisis that becomes catalyst for a great leap. Now, the danger is whenever you have a great leap, there is always a danger of a great fall. That is, by definition, the way in which these things go. So it's never a sure deal. So again, I think we're in this moment in which things feel and are very intense. So I believe that our current collective crises, these various crises that can be also catalysts for growth, be they political, environmental, social, I believe that what this is about, these collective crises, are largely the result of collective glamour, and therefore we are being called to break these glamours. And individually as well, when we look at our own selves, our own spiritual development, a lot of our individual crises are also, I believe, rooted in glamour. The other reason why I think this is important is occultists, esotericists, mystics, however you want to frame kind of the people who come together on a Saturday and spend their time doing this. One of the things that we have in common is that we can actively work as actively work on the inner planes as spiritual service to consciously dissipate group glamour. So we have something to give. So all of these things are the reasons why I am looking at this topic. So as I said, one of the big things that I'm always looking for is trying to identify what is in alignment with this kind of evolution, this general evolution, and what is an anti-evolutionary force that we need to look at, and then we need to see how we can address it. So, as I said, I believe that a huge part of what we're actually going through as a species is a coming of age crisis, where our goal is to become fully responsible spiritual adults, individually and as a species. And this, we're in a transition. It's not always going as well as we might like it to be. So, but when I look in this large frame, part of what I see here is that self-governance, adulthood requires self-governance. It requires us individually to take responsibilities for ourselves, but collectively, we also see this trend through democratic movements, small d, throughout the world, where we have this rise of democracy. It's not necessarily that always leads to better government, but it does mean that on a global level, all individuals are being called upon to take more responsibility for the well-being of their collectives and to govern themselves. And this is a huge difference than if we look back 200, 300, 400 years ago. And we're definitely seeing this trend, even though we might see in the short-term backlash, this is part of the trend that we see. There's also increasingly, on the part of everyone, not just elites, a requirement for critical and complex thinking. Our world now is very, very complex, and it is forcing us to open up and become more active in higher complex thought processes and that aspect of our being, the higher mind. And this is from everything from our necessity to trying to understand how money works, which again, 400 years ago, most people were doing bartering. They didn't have to know something as complex and abstract as money. And for things like even jobs that might a couple generations ago not have required as much critical thought, like being a mechanic, now you have to also pretty well be a computer expert to even be a mechanic. All these different things, all these systems are requiring every single one of us to have this deeper, critical, complex thinking if we're going to thrive. Another thing that I'm seeing is an increase demand to reconcile emotions and reason. We used to have for a very long time this, I would say, glamour of putting head against heart, and that is a delusion. There's nothing there that it makes those two incompatible or opposites. Instead, we're being called upon to look at things like emotional intelligence and realizing that a mind that is not also guided by heart is problematic, and a heart that is not guided by mind is, running around and doing things that are not particularly wise. So I think we are pulling together and seeing these things more as complements, and anything that I see on that trajectory is allowing us to be more fully integrated humans. Another thing is that there's an emphasis, and you certainly see this in the business world, an increasing emphasis on cooperation instead of competition. And there may still be competition between individual businesses, but at the same time, when you look within businesses, everything is about how well do you function on a team, because at this point, there is too much knowledge for anybody to know it all. It's just we can't. We have to rely on specialists. And as Stephen mentioned, I work in higher education, and that used to be for a very long time, that was like a bastion of like the individual genius doing their thing. Well, not anymore. You want to get a scientific paper done, if you look at them, there's often like 1,000 authors on a scientific paper. It is a lot of people pulling together to do things. And even in the humanities, we have a rise of joint projects and joint authorship and so forth. There's a lot there where we have to rely on specialists, because nobody can know everything. And part of what that means is that we have to develop and increase our sophistication in trust, building trust. How do we figure out who to trust, how to trust? What does trust mean? That's another area that I see in terms of helping us identify what is evolutionary, what is anti-evolutionary. There is an increasing emphasis on the reality of interdependence. For a long time, we didn't understand interdependence, but that wasn't because interdependence wasn't there. It was just our lack of understanding of it. But if we're going to face and deal with a lot of the crises that we're dealing with today, such as all of the ecological disaster, we have to understand interdependence, because ecosystems are radically interdependent. And so it is, again, these crises as catalyst. It is making us see more interdependence and therefore more unity. And that is more in alignment with the way in which philosophers such as the Buddhist understanding of codependent arising and so forth has already been in that direction. But it's coming down into a level where it's no longer just an elite kind of situation of trying to understand that. It's everybody needs to understand it, and we're all being given a lot of challenges to do so. Similarly, our economic system with globalization, when something happens in the housing market in California, it has impacts in Sri Lanka and vice versa. So all of these things are forcing an emphasis on understanding interdependence. Another thing that I think is important in terms of the evolution of our heartfelt interdependence is that the ready availability of news globally means that we see and understand what is happening to other people. And you mix that with the massive scale of international migration, and we can often feel our heart opening in these bigger ways. And I'm just thinking immediately of my personal experience, which is, whenever we have something such as this horrible earthquake in Turkey and Syria with all of these people dead, displaced, wounded, we know about it. And I live in a very cosmopolitan area. There's almost no place a tragedy happens that I don't know somebody who has a connection there. And so there's this deeper, immediate, heartfelt kind of connection to that sort of suffering. And I think, again, that's making our perception, not just rationally, but on all levels of being of the world, as in much closer to unity than it would have been 300 years ago, when you might not have known anybody from that area and you wouldn't have found out about it potentially for months, if at all. One of the other things that I see here in terms of this emphasis on interdependence is that we are beginning to have discussions about the rights of non-human persons. And that's another thing, are dolphins non-human persons? Do they have rights, etc.? Another big trend that I see is attempting to reconcile unity and diversity. Like I said, I believe that things that are moving us towards more of this consciousness of unity are generally in an evolutionary trajectory, but we're also trying and wrestling with how do we do this in a way that does not undermine our love and appreciation and nurturing of our beautiful diversity at the same time. And I also see beginning, and I think it's a good thing, this re-emphasis on the personal creative. One of the challenges with the rise of industrial capitalism has been that we have been trained into being consumers, and there is now more of an emphasis, again, I think, on trying to get us to reclaim our role as creators. And I think all of that, which allows us to more fully embrace and develop our full personhood, is in alignment with evolution. So again, part of the reason I'm doing this within Glamour is whenever I see anything that is running in a counter-evolutionary trend, that to me is kind of an immediate red flag that I ought to stop and take a deeper look at something. So I do want to take a quick word of caution as we're talking about glamours, that when we're trying to do this kind of work, I believe we have two different things that are really kind of our responsibility. The first one is that we need to look at our own glamours, trying to use it for our own self-improvement. Now, I'm going to say every one of us is under the thrall of some glamours, because if we were completely glamour free, we will have graduated already from a human condition into whatever is next. And since we're all here together, I'm going to say every one of us has some glamours that we need to attend to. The other thing is that we have a responsibility as part of various systems to look at those systems. However, if you use this idea of glamour to then judge others, that in and of itself becomes a glamour. So there's your warning. It's not your work to go like analyzing other individuals. Analyze yourself, analyze systems. So I just have to say that as a word of caution. All right. So let's go into some of the theoretical background. Now I'm going to take this overarching concept of glamours and try to understand it within a framework of kind of philosophy that also has to do with how magic works. All right, so one of the first foundational concepts is that all of reality exists on a vibratory range. Everything is vibration, and everything is this range of vibration. All reality is made up of this range of vibration. From what we call highest spirit, which is the most rarefied, high vibration, all the way down into the densest material, which is like the slowest vibration. And that this range of vibration exists on scales. So the diagram that we have here, and there's different words, different ways you can use this, but these are the Theosophical words. That it goes all the way from the physical up to Atma, which is that highest spiritual. So my favorite definition of a human being comes from my beloved Theosophical elder, Julia Rogers, who passed on a couple years ago. But her definition was, a human being is any being in any time, in any place, wearing any body, in which highest spirit and lowest matter are joined at the plane of mind. Now on this diagram, the plane of mind is that blue where it says manas. So when I said, you know, the action for humans, the action, we exist on all of this, but the action for us is in that blue. And you can see then over on the other side, you have the subscales. So there's this sympathetic resonance that goes through the whole system, and you have these subscales. So when I'm talking about glamour, a glamour is a delusion that occurs at the level of being in which cognition is mixed with emotion. That is the green subscale over there of the blue. That's the area in which we're talking. That's this realm of vibration in which glamour occurs. And one of the things to note is this is not just, we exist on all of these, but everything is kind of existing on these different planes. So when we talk about a plane over there, it means it's anything vibrating at that particular level. And we interact with the planes depending upon where our attention is located at that moment. So as I said, for the vast majority of humans, most, not all, but most of our time and attention is spent on that green of the blue. Now, the abstract mind is that blue of the blue. And from there up, those are the parts that are immortal. That is part of our immortal self. That's from the abstract mind up. But like I said, most of our action is actually at the green of the blue. And I also want to emphasize there's nothing wrong with any of these. It is actually very important to have good, well-functioning capacity at all of the different levels. There's nothing bad about the green of the blue. So it's just that, you know, like I said, that's where this particular issue tends to lie. So I want to show you a different diagram of this, because you can see here on this one where it looks like it's all coming down. This is, you know, from highest vibration down to lowest vibration. But another way to look at it is like this. So that, you know, you have that highest vibration is there. That's the ultimate divine unity. And as you see, it's kind of growing, getting bigger, and it was in the blue, which again is the mind, that you begin to see differentiation. And so as you can see within the blue, partway through is where you begin to see this feeling of separation. And that place where the blue begins to feel separate, that is that green of the blue. That is the area in which cognition is mixed with emotion. It is where we first begin this experience of being separate. And you can see here then in the denser vehicles all the way down to the physical, that is where this sense of separation becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So that also goes into this idea that when we are working on evolution, as we are able to experience more of that unity, that is part of the evolutionary process, because that is when we are becoming more consciously aware and operating in a greater level of our being. We automatically are pretty naturally awake and aware on the separation, the separate aspects, the lower vibrations. So I also do want to talk briefly about thought forms, because ultimately glamours are a type of thought form. Okay, so as a general kind of outline here, when we have some thoughts that are being created, you know, they can come down through the spiritual intuition, which would be the purple, and also then the subscale, that purple of the blue. They're coming down from the kind of divine unity. And at some point, there can be distortion. And that is usually the distortion at the illusion level is happening at the blue of blue. So that's at that beginning, that's the abstract mind. It is right before we head into differentiation. But it's also, thought forms are very powerful. If we are trying to create something powerful and we can bring something through without distortion, then that's where it can hit the green of the blue, that concrete mind. And it is at the level of the concrete mind in which the thoughts begin to pull together from the there's a whole other thing I could tell you about elemental powers and all that, but it begins to accrete substance. Astral substance is what we sometimes would call it. So that what happens is that thought form then becomes clothed in substance. It becomes like a thing. And most of the time, we're always creating thought forms. This is a constant thing. Most of the time, our thoughts are kind of brief and they kind of dissipate very quickly. But if you have a thought form that is strengthened by either repetition, is one way to strengthen a thought form. If it's particularly clear, it has intensity of emotion behind it, or if it is something that is shared, such as shared in a culture, it can become more solid and fixed. Now, this, like I said, can be used for good. This is a huge part of what we actually do in magic, is we are trying to create beneficent thought forms. That's a huge part of what we're doing. And so there's nothing inherently wrong about it unless there is some sort of distortion, at which point then it can become a glamour. Now, part of the issue is if this is something that has repetition, clarity, intensity of motion, and is shared, it can begin to have its own independent life completely apart from the people who originated it. So it becomes this kind of thing that is out there on that level of being, on that level of vibration, that can become separated and continuing to build itself. So we all have these thought forms that are part of our individual piece, but like I said, it can become something, especially if it is shared or has particular potency, that then can go off and begin impacting other people and have its own independent existence. And those are some of the most powerful glamours that we have as a society. A little bit more theory here. So, in addition to all of this, one of the things to note is that we experience ourselves, as I showed in the diagram, that's kind of like the sun-like thing here. We experience ourselves in our lower nature as being individual, but on a fundamental level, we are part of larger beings. Now, I want to take for a second, and some of you who are on this have already heard me do this particular analogy, but I just think it's useful for trying to understand. So if you were to take, imagine for a moment as an analogy, if you were to take cells from my blood, put them in a petri dish, and take care of them, they can have their own independent existence. There is a way in which those cells are their own independent thing. And at the same time, just because you took some of my blood and you put it in a petri dish, there is nothing inherently lost in the integrity of my body. My body continues to go on. It's still its own thing. However, if you look at my body and you took away all of the cells, then there's nothing there. So my body is only experiencing things through the cells, even though individual cells die off, come in and out, and they do have, in a way, their own independent existence. In a similar way, we individually are cells of larger beings. There's things called soul groups, there's the soul of the family, but in this case, I'm most interested in the idea that there is a greater being that is humanity. And we are all a part of this greater being that is the group soul of humanity. And humanity is only learning, growing, evolving through the experiences of all of us. So for me personally, when I am sitting here and I am thinking, I want to be better, I want to be better, I am going to work on this glamour, I want to be more kind, I want to be more whatever, I am part of the group soul of humanity saying that. I am an aspirational part of the group soul of humanity. And so when we're doing these different things and we're focused on our own growth, I think it's important for us to know that this is part of the evolution of the group soul. And when we're working to serve the group soul, we are part of the group soul doing that. At the same time, and like I said, I believe that the group soul of humanity, that where we are right now collectively, is trying to become an adult. And at the moment, we're kind of a troubled teen, is kind of how I look at that. And I honestly think that really is what's going on. But the group soul of humanity then is part of a larger being that we sometimes call the planetary logos. We might call it Gaia. It is the great being that is this planet. This planet on which we live and move and have our being is a being. We are a part of it. And particularly for humans, we are a part of the mind of the planet, is really, again, where our action is. So I see the evolution of the planet as also going through a coming of age crisis. And I think the way in which it is manifesting is in the various environmental crises that we are dealing with. And I should mention again, like that, the being that is the planet, when we look at the planet, our beautiful, beloved, sacred planet, the body that we see and walk on is only its physical level. It has all of those other levels of being as well. It has an astral form, it has a soul form, it has a spirit form, it has all of these different things as well. And like I said, we are part of the group mind of the planet. And then the planet is part of the great being that is the solar system. And the solar system is a part of larger beings still. But for us as humans, that's kind of our ring pass knot in terms of where we can consciously really move, is roughly at the solar logos at this point in our own evolution. So again, we have a role in the overall planetary soul. And when we're doing this kind of work, we are part of the group soul of humanity, trying to, in my opinion, do shadow work. That's what we're doing. And I do believe the evolution, it's not just very gradual. It has these punctuated moments. And I just think, we're in the midst of a coming of age initiatory crisis. And to mention again, initiation is when you are using crisis as catalyst for growth. Crisis as catalyst for one of these great leaps. And there's no such thing as a great leap without the danger of a great fall. So when we are working on trying to understand glamour, it's also important then, given the fact that we exist on all these different levels of being, that we talk about our ways of knowing, our noetic process. Because in order to deal with glamour, what we have to do is get our attention focused above its level. So this is what we sometimes call rising on the planes. And what we're trying to do here is to get above in our immediate experience that part on this diagram that is that green slice of the blue. So the way to do that is quiescence first, which means all of the aspects of self that are at those like denser vibrations, we just have to try to get them quiet. And that includes like quieting the body, quieting all of kind of our feeling aspect, quieting the part of mind that is constantly chattering at us, and just quiet. And then what we do, it's not just like, it's not like quiet to the point of going to sleep. It's also you're trying to get that quiet, and then you're trying to have this very positive, energetic kind of moment in which you are then moving up and operating at that abstract plane of mind and that intuitional plane of mind. So it's a very active, engaged, while trying to get the lower to be quiet. So we have a number of different ways of knowing as a human. And in this diagram, which, like I said, is using the Theosophical language, that purple, the buddhi, and then the purple subscale under manas, this has to do with intuition, spiritual intuition. So spiritual intuition is non-rational. It's not irrational, it's non-rational. And a lot of times for many of us, when we have those moments where we've been able to quiet and we're kind of positively focused and holding attention, and we have this experience, it kind of feels like a download is the way in which we're talking about it. And it takes a while for everything to kind of unpack. I like that metaphor that we've gotten from computer science of like the zip file is downloaded and it takes a while to fully come through. That is an intuitional moment. And also sometimes there are these moments in which you just know something and you're not sure, it's a rupa, it doesn't have form, it just comes into you whole and you just know it. Now, at the same time, we always need to be careful and double check ourselves to make sure that it is not something that is a delusion coming from a different level of being. And there's a couple of different tricks that I use for that. First of all, it's the knowledge that the non-rational, because all things that are rational are descended from it, the non-rational is never irrational. If you have something that feels like a spiritual intuition and your reason is revolting, take a closer look and make sure it's not an illusion. And the other thing that I tend to do is I tend to, when I get these kind of like downloads or this sort of like, I think I just know something and it's really powerful, and there's a particular kind of moment, at least for me, and I think it has to do with when we're talking about Platonic recollection, I think it's something like this, is that experience of like, I have always known this, but I didn't realize it until this moment. That kind of like gut feeling that comes with that, that's one of my keys for like, I think I'm getting a true spiritual intuition. But I check it against my reason. And then I look at it in terms of its effect and its impact on my character. So if it is coming from this kind of unified divine consciousness, then it should be, if it is true, feeding those higher aspects of myself. So it should be making me more compassionate, more kind, more understanding, more wise. And if it's having the opposite impact, then I'm going to look at it to see whether or not it's actually an illusion. Okay, so that's intuition. Now, abstract thought, that's that blue of blue. And again, that's the break in which everything that is of a higher vibration is part of the immortal self that just, it's the part that doesn't die away at the end of an incarnation. So that is, thought that is what we are often dealing with in philosophy. It's thinking about thinking. It's the Platonic, when you're thinking about Platonic ideals. And it's often the thought that happens when you are thinking about spiritual or intellectual things. So it's not thinking about the world as much as thinking about ideas. And that is often where the abstract thought is coming in. And like I said, we want to think about the real world as well. You do want to think and do that well. That's often in the next, that green, the green of blue, the concrete mind. Now, again, I just want to re-emphasize again, we do not need more sages sitting in caves unable to do anything or unwilling to do anything. We need people actively engaged in the world. So I'm saying that from the perspective of, we have to have very good functioning practical minds in order to be a benefit of the world. So this is not a value statement here about like one aspect of mind being better than the other. It's just where our attention is and the fact that we have these different ways of knowing. So in that kind of the concrete mind, that green of the blue, which is the place where glamour comes in, that also is about our practical thinking about the world, which is incredibly important. It includes most of our psychism, not the intuition, but the psychism a lot of times, because it's tied into what we call the astral. And it also is what we recognize as emotion. Almost all of what we recognize as emotion is at this level. It almost always is mixed with cognition. And so it's very rarely pure emotion. It's often got like stories and ideas associated with it. But there is such a thing as true pure emotion. And that is often, it's a little bit denser, and it is the intelligence of our physical body. The intelligence of our physical animal is often what we experience as true pure emotion. And just really briefly, I want us to pay some attention to that, even though it's not necessarily about glamour. But when you have a powerful emotional reaction, especially anything that might involve like dread, fear, whatever. Look to see whether or not it has cognition actually attached to it in the first moment, because part of the nature of mind, of this green, the green part, that concrete mind, is to start making up stories, some of which are very helpful and have meaning, and some of which may just be wrong, but they can obscure true pure emotion. And that is where we get the warning signs of like, something is badly wrong and I need to go to a hospital. The fact that we routinely overlook this is why we are often finding people who don't go to the hospital for a heart attack, or don't get screened for cancer, or don't realize that they're on the verge of a major depression until it is much later than it could have been, if they could have heard through the kind of chattering mind and the story making mind to that pure emotion. So I do want to mention that that's part of it. But for the purpose of dealing with glamour, what we're trying to do is to get above where the glamour can come in. So at that abstract thought and the spiritual intuition, in order to get a closer look at it, we have to rise above it so that we're not distorted. So let's go on then to some functional analysis. So I think the first thing is trying to recognize, when am I dealing with a glamour? And so my red flags include, like, it's a cognitive pattern that evokes an emotional reaction in the person having it, that puts them in a position of superiority of others, or it can invite others to make themselves feel bigger by making somebody else small. Whenever I see that, I'm like, hold on, let me take a closer look at that. I might be dealing with a glamour. I probably am. Another one is anytime I see a pattern in which it gives somebody who's experiencing it a feeling of power while taking their power away. So when I see something that I'm like, I think I'm dealing with a glamour here, I start to try to do analysis. And I'm going to say, I'm going to give you an example here in a minute. It is, the reality of doing this is messier, because a lot of times you see something and you name it. At least in my experience, I see something, I name it, and then I'm doing the analysis, I realize it's actually something else, and I have to rename it several times, and that's okay. This is the process of dealing with it. But part of what I'm looking at, I think functional analysis is really where it is most helpful. So you're trying to ask yourself, how does this function? What are the effects on an individual? What are the effects on a collective? And then a huge part of what I'm looking for is, how does it feed itself or propagate? Because especially, as I mentioned, those thought forms that can get independent and go out there, they have to be self-propagating in some way. Or even if it's with you, what is it calling on for you that is keeping this thing alive and active, so it's continuing to impact you? And then one of the other things I'm looking for is, does it obscure alternatives or where the actual power lies? So I'm going to give you an example of one that I've worked on a fair amount. And I know that some people who are actually on this session have worked on this with me in terms of doing a glamour for this. And that's the glamour of cynicism. So cynicism itself is very pervasive, but I want to take a moment as we're talking about this and look at it within the context of politics, because I think that's where we can see it the most clearly. So cynicism then is this attitude that everything is rigged. So there's actually no point in trying to make things better. Or if you are going to try, you're going to do so in some grand protest that is not actually a strategy, or even in extreme cases, engage in a kind of a burn it all down mentality without thinking about creating alternatives. That's the way in which I see it manifesting. So the cynical person, what happens is that they believe that they see the putative truth, that everything is rigged, because they are intelligent, and because they are more intelligent than anyone who doesn't see it. And so functionally then what happens is that cynicism becomes an identity marker of intelligence and a way to justify feeling superior to others. So one of the things that happens then is, because intelligent people tend to value their own intelligence, there's this pressure, this internal pressure from this glamour to verify your own intelligence by becoming cynical. So the glamour of cynicism, what it does then functionally is it removes masses of people from actually working to make a meaningful difference in their community, which is what politics actually ultimately is. It's the polis. It's acting in your polis, your city, your community. Simultaneously, it also enables them not to feel any responsibility for improving things. Instead, there's this self-amplifying feedback loop that absolutely disempowers those who are in the thrall of this glamour, while increasing their own deluded sense of status as being intelligent people. And then the more things go to hell, the more self-righteous they feel, believing that they've been vindicated as being right, while being ultimately blind to the fact that their role in this is actually very causal. And so that's kind of an example of analysis of how I see cynicism and see it as a glamour. So I want to go a little bit more into recognizing glamour. So again, I went through all those evolutionary forces because I think one of the first things is if you see something as anti-evolutionary retrogression in yourself or in society, that is a place to first pay attention. In yourself, some warning signs of like, is this a glamour? Are you feeling critical of something for which you have no personal responsibility? Are you being critical when, if you step back, analysis does not show it as being warranted? Does it make you feel better than somebody else? Are you making yourself feel big by making someone else small? Those are all warning signs I look at. Also, are you defining yourself or inviting someone else to define themselves in opposition to something rather than claiming what you or they are? So this kind of idea of like, I'm not that. You should be able to say what you are, what you believe, not just that you're not something. If you see that if your entire emphasis is on not being something, then there may be a glamour at play. Does it cut you off from power while also relieving you of your sense of responsibility? Those to me are all big warning signs in addition to the major categories. Warning signs of societal glamour is things like, when observed from a state of detachment, are people who would be making positive change in the world being neutralized by some sort of construct without realizing it? Does the construct seem so common sense that it obscures alternatives that are present if you step back and observe from detachment? This is something I call the tyranny of common sense. When this thought construct is activated or challenged in society, does the backlash against it objectively seem highly emotional and unreasonable? That is, again, another huge warning sign that I see. And does the construct play easily into creating or reinforcing in-group, out-group kinds of identities? Those are all things that I am looking for as part of societal glamour. So I want to try another one. But we're going to do this one as a group. We're going to go through and see if we can figure this one out. And so this is what I'm calling the glamour of moral outrage. And I want to be clear about this. Moral outrage is a completely natural experience and is an appropriate experience in many, many circumstances. What I'm talking about with the glamour of moral outrage is when we have circumstances in which the feeling of outrage itself is the end product. So in other words, it's not like you feel outrage and you are then moved to try to do something. It's you feel outrage and then you feel like you've done something to improve the world, or you're done in some way. And the reason that I think this one is such a big, challenging one at this moment is that we know that this is a real thing that is being monetized. It is being monetized very directly in various kinds of algorithms, because what the systems that are doing this have figured out is that it is very easy to provoke moral outrage over and over and over again. And that if they can just keep people in this constant sense of outrage, they will capture their attention and make them essentially enthralled to whatever is doing that. So this is one that I think is really potent, because I want us to hold on to that, because that's the glamour we're going to try to take aim at today. And hopefully what this means is that whenever we see it, we can at least start conversations with other people. And when we see it operating in ourselves, we can go, hold on, I think that this is that glamour, Colin, right? So we've talked a little bit about like, how is it working, what its effects are, and it's got this effect on the individuals and on the collective. And it's dealing with something that is a very deep, I think, insecurity, it sounds like, for social kind of, all of those different things where we feel helpless, we felt like we maybe don't belong, but we also are feeling this constant need to verify kind of that we are in this distorted understanding of solidarity and things of that nature. Okay, so I'm just going to mention here, we don't have time to go into them, but if anybody decides they really want to start incorporating this into their practice and work on some additional ones, some of the really big ones for humanity, there's the glamour of materialism, which is, you know, that idea of like all things are money. We're very focused on our material possessions. Sentimentalism, which is often confused with love. That's kind of more about the emotional connections that are more self-centered. And you can do that with your gods, with your religion as well, devotional sentimentalism. And then there's the glamour of the pairs of opposites. We have this propensity to see things in opposition to each other. And earlier I mentioned like head and heart. Head and heart are not opposites. You know, these things, they are stronger when you bring them together. So our propensity to automatically start defining things and seeing things in pairs of opposites, and then often making value judgments about them where one is good and one is bad. There's also a significant glamour of anthropocentrism. So a moment here about spiritual development and glamour. So the stronger we become on the astral, you know, and when our mind is functioning more powerfully, we become naturally producers of strong glamour and illusion that can affect others. So this is one of those things with the two sides of the coin and our responsibility, because we also then have greater capacity the more active and engaged we are on greater aspects of self to dispel illusion and dissipate glamour, because we're able to work in the non-physical with intention. So that's just a call for us to remember that we need to always be working. The more powerful we are, the more responsibility we have, because we have more power. And so that gives us more power to both do harm and to correct harm. So countering glamours, the first thing that you want to do is identify a glamour. And, you know, that's the first thing, like, okay, I think I'm experiencing some sort of a glamour, seeing something, trying to figure out what is it. And then we're going to do some of that analysis. If it's personal, you want to kind of look at what is it in you that is feeding on it. What's feeding this glamour? Like, what is it that's continuing to empower it? And if it's societal, then you can share the insight and analysis with others, get the conversation like the one we just had started. We're all now thinking a little bit more about that. And anyone who is thinking about it, that gives us a chance to break free of it and to recognize when it's impacting us. And then you can do ritual or meditation to dissipate the glamour, which is what we're going to do together here in a bit. So for dissipating glamour, basically the way in which it works, if you remember back to that diagram with kind of the green of the blue, it's a thought form that basically creates something that looks essentially like smog, to be honest. It looks like old smog over LA. It's this cloud on the astral that blocks higher vibrations from penetrating. And so it causes this kind of confusion, upset, bewilderment sort of thing. And it is a form of miasma. So miasma is an ancient Greek word. I use this a lot in my own thinking, and it basically means spiritual pollution, the spiritual pollution that comes from being out of right relationship. So a glamour is a form of miasma, and like I said, it looks like smog on the inner planes. And the way to deal with it, if you're going to deal with it directly, energetically, is through illumination. So the major quality of soul is light, and I don't mean that as a metaphor. The ancient Greek word pneuma, which means simultaneously spirit, breath, and wind, those are not three different definitions of one word. They are actually all the same thing. It's this moment of trying to experience, when you experience wind, experiencing it, it's also spirit. And so light in a similar way is radiance, truth, soul, it's fundamental reality, energy, substance. It's all of these different things. And that's what it actually is. And so in combating glamour, then, illumination is, we're going to work predominantly at the abstract mental. It goes through everything, but that's where we're going to be operating, because we want to get up above where the smog is, and then you direct light towards it, and it like literally just burns off, kind of the way in which sun burns off fog. It burns off glamour and works to dissipate the glamour. So in individual illumination, the practice there, if you want to do this in more of a meditative state on a personal level, basically you establish contact with the soul or the individuality, you pull in all the lights of the soul and matter and everything, the light that is behind all, contemplate and analyze the glamour until you see the truth, until you have this sense of like, I've got it here. And then you turn your attention towards the astral where you see the smog. And you can either pull in energy into the lights of the head, which is what we're going to do in this ritual, or into the heart. It doesn't matter. You can do it from either. And then you radiate like a spotlight. You just radiate as much as you can. Now, one of the things to know is that if you begin feeling over emotional while you're doing this, you're probably accidentally radiating from the solar plexus, which is a little bit more sensitive in ways that you'll just want to back off and kind of calm that down. Then you're naming the glamour, affirming the power of the light to protect you, and just dissipating. So you're just burning like that, like the spotlight. Radiate, let go of your sense of achievement or non-achievement. And if you're dealing with something that is deep and personal, or if you're doing this as service, it just requires repetition and trust. As much as I would love to say that by the end of this ritual, no one will ever experience the glamour of, outrage, moral outrage again, that is not likely to be the case, but we are going to try to weaken it. And kind of the more in which we do these things, the weaker they become. So it does require repetition and just trust that it's working, which is essential in all magic. So for group work, and I like to do things in group work, I think that is in alignment with our general evolutionary trends, because I think we're trying to move away from the great man of history, moving in towards more of a collective consciousness moment. There's actually two different ways to work magically with people. One of them is to work in a group in which you have intimacy, this deep sympathy that's free from personality frictions. And for those of us such as, do coven work or whatever, that's usually the type of group that we are working with. We're working with people who are deeply connected with each other. The other way to do it, though, which also works, is you can have a group in which there's just no personality connections. You have some work that you're doing, you come together, you don't really talk to each other on a personal level, you're there, you're doing service, you're focused, you leave. And that actually also works well. And it's best if you're working with a group if you can do it in some sort of regular cycle, because rhythm is important. So for group illumination, first you need to find a way to connect with a group. We're going to do this on Zoom. An easy way to do it, and this is like a simpler way if you don't want to use the ritual that I designed. This is a kind of simpler way if you're not big ritual people. Each person is named, you look into their eye, look into the one person's eye for about a minute, and then you move on to the next, and what you're doing is connecting the energy, because there's light that connects with the eyes. Put up whatever protection you use in your group. Perform all the connection of the soul in terms of moving the lights and connecting with the lights. And then you jointly turn the searchlight onto the glamour on the astral, radiate for about 5 minutes, see it dispersing, and then just stay in silence and then withdraw. You're going to need, if you connect with other people energetically, you also need to disconnect energetically. This is in case we wanted to do anything that would be more specific. One of the things that the first time I did some of this, I asked, in our spiritual communities, what are some of the glamours that are most prominent? Various things, like when we're turning the spotlight on our own communities. And some of the ones that we had come up with when I was doing this with a group of pagans, there's the fluffy bunny sanction, speaking ill of New Agers or light workers, or the ones where it's like, someone's not doing witchcraft right, someone's not doing meditation right. That, those were all some things that we were talking about. So I would say that some of the biggest glamours that I see in society right now are things, and this was mentioned in our analysis, this kind of tribal sort of thing where we're trying to divide ourselves up into these groups and defining ourselves against others. This tribalism, agonistic thinking, which that is the competitive zero-sum thinking. That is the general thinking that says, your success is at my cost. Or if I am going to win, it's going to hurt someone else. And, this is something, it even gets like embedded in things like grading on the curve. Toxic individualism that keeps us from understanding interdependence is one of the ones I think that is there. Also, the notion of merit. There's a lot of glamour around merit and meritocracy. And then also, I would say this notion that money is value. So the first thing that we do in a ritual is grounding and centering. And I'll lead you through this, just go through and have the experience. But part of what we're doing when we're grounding and centering is that we're intentionally shifting our consciousness and our energy to connect with the powers of the cosmos, the earth and the sky, to put ourselves in, we are already connected, but to more consciously connect and bring all of that together, so that part of what's happening is, as we're using our power for the ritual, we are able to draw on everything, not just on our own personal energy. And part of what we're doing as we're doing this is also aligning all of our parts of self and becoming more fully present. We're setting aside the mundane and entering into the sacred work. So this is a gateway into sacred time. And for those of us who do a lot of ritual and a lot of magic, and some of you may have a different way of perceiving this, but it's a chance for us to take this moment and to step into our magical persona, is what we often call it. But you can think of it, if you're more on the mystic side, it's who you are in your big self when you are doing sacred work. So it is a chance to step into that and begin to fully inhabit this notion in which you are all of yourself present and in your biggest self. So that's grounding and centering. Now, I'm going to go through in a minute. We'll be doing some casting, and because I didn't know what religion people were going to be coming in from, I made this as non-denominational as I could. So I'm not calling on specific gods through this, but I am going to be calling on particular powers, and these are the elements, the powers that are making up the cosmos. So in the in the East, which we associate with air, I'm going to ask you to go to your own sense of inner East and to call in, when we're doing the casting, call in and envision these various powers being present. And for me, I often find my visceral feeling of the seasons to be particularly potent when I'm trying to connect to some of the elements. So air, it's spring, it's mind, it's thought, it's discernment. All of that is part of the power of air. And in the South, we associate this with fire, the element of fire, summer, vitality, passion, and will. In the West, we associate it with water, which is fall. It's that intuition, compassion, the deep wisdom and understanding. In the North, we're focused on earth. So that's winter, it's form, foundation, stability, all of those kinds of powers we're going to be calling in together. And so when we're creating sacred space, what we're really doing is that we are creating a container. And it's a delineation between mundane and sacred. And part of this is that containers do offer some protection, but they also keep the energy from dissipating. So for instance, when you're looking at a river, if you don't have banks on a river, it's not a river, it's just a flood, and it goes everywhere and dissipates. So it's the creation of that river bank so that the power can run through. And that's part of what we're doing here when we're creating sacred space. Now, I went through these various elements because before we do that, we're actually going to do some purification. And to do the purification, we're going to use those elements. Now, this is something that I said, if you have these, if you can comfortably do these, then it would be good for you to use them. So, because I know all of you are probably in different situations at home here when we're going through this, but salt water, which I have a bowl of water and I dissolve salt into it. And then for me, I blow blue flame into it to consecrate. So I'm blowing with my breath 3 times, and I'm seeing my breath come out as the blue part of that flame. And that's kind of where a lot of the power is. But that is a way to have salt. Salt water is to bring in the powers of both earth and water. And so you're going to anoint yourself and sprinkle it around your space and see your space as being purified and becoming, sacred space, different than mundane space. Incense is fire and air, and you can smudge yourself and sense your space. Now, if you have asthma and you can't have incense, don't worry about it. Just don't use it. Imagine you have it. If you have a cat that is going to turn around and set things on fire, then don't have flame. All of these things are things that you're going to be reasonable about how you do them. And if you can't do them safely, then don't do them in your space. But part of what we're doing here, and you can envision it, but part of what we're doing ideally is we're pulling in those 4 elements, and we're we're kind of purifying ourselves and our space to be doing more of the shift from mundane into sacred time and space. And it's part of the process of putting everything else to the side so we can be fully present in all of our being. So for the invocations and intention here, what I'm going to do is an invocation to just generally the holy beings of light and of healing. And within your own space, if there are particular beings that you work with that you want to call, do it to be present. But part of the reason that we do this is that for the great ones or other spirits, you have to ask for help. Most of them have some good, healthy respect for our boundaries, and they don't show up and interject themselves into your lives unless you ask, which means it's important to ask for help. Now, another thing is that I encourage you to say this out loud, because there's something important about actually speaking the words that brings more power to it. So we're going to do the exclamation of intent. Now, I tend to do this because stating a clear intention does a couple of different things. It both builds the thought form and the power and makes it clear what you're trying to accomplish and why. Because when you're calling on great beings or spirits, there's a couple of different things. You have some that may just show up because you're in a close relationship with them and they love you. So that is always part of it, that they're there because you ask them and they love you and they're going to be there. But at the same time, all beings, including us, we all have agendas. We all have things that we want to see done. And part of what we're doing is we're making the case for alignment, because there are times in which you can call on beings that you maybe don't have that super close relationship with, but who you know are in alignment with this work. And like I said, you know, any of the beings that are associated with healing, with light, those are beings that should be in alignment with the agendas for this work. So I also then have us saying the Gayatri. The Gayatri, this is a translation, obviously, it's a Sanskrit hymn, but it's a Sanskrit hymn that it very powerfully calls on the power of divine light is part of what it does. And so that again raises the vibration and calls in some of that power. Then what we're going to do is working on opening the 3 streams and the 3 lights. So when you go into your blood, and I'll, walk you through this, your blood has light in it, and that is light that connects you to all of your ancestors. And we're going to pull that up into the brainstem. And then your heart, this is going to be where you are awakening that light that is your heart light that has to do with the light of the personal soul. We're going to pull that up from the heart into the 3rd eye. So we're dealing with that. And then the immortal self, that aspect of yourself that is your highest self, pull that into the crown. And then what we got, so we got these 3, and we're going to pull them together into the secret place in the center of the head and awaken the light there. And then I will walk you through this, but we're going to pull that light that we've been pulling together. We're going to pull all the sacred powers of light together until we're a beacon. We're going to think about, and we're doing the glamour of moral outrage. And we are going to look out onto the astral until we see smog. And then we are going to shine with the brightest light that you can. And at that point, we are going to tone. And so toning is just basically singing a note, however it is that comes out of you. And I recommend that we actually do this, because I find that actually the vocal piece of that helps us move the energy more. And so we're going to tone until we see that miasma beginning to break up. You see the fog beginning to dissipate. We tone till the work is done, and then we're just going to sit in silence for a minute. And then after that, one of the things to know, trust yourself, trust the process, just trust that it's going to be what it is. Because when all of us are doing it and we're all pulling in from all these aspects of self, we're quite powerful. So then the next thing, like I said, whenever you are working and you are combining your group energy, your energy into a group pattern, you need to detach. So again, I will call on you. And at that point, what you're going to do is affirm that the work is done and is well done. And as you are doing that, you're pulling back your energy and just letting it go. And then together, thank the beings who helped us, which if you called any in, thank them. And then we'll release the boundary, and then we are done. So if we can all just close our eyes, And take a deep breath. Let it out. Take another deep breath. Let it out. Take a third deep breath, as deep as you can make it. And let it out. Let go of all distractions and worries. And now become aware of yourself and your body sitting in your space, the space that is comfortable and sacred to you. And become aware in your feet. Let your feet open and feel your energy flowing down like roots. Down, 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 down through the floor of your building, down into the earth, the sacred earth beneath. And feel those roots pushing down, down, climbing down through the soil, down until it hits the water of the water table, down further and further into the hard rock, down into the earth, feeling the warmth deep, deep within this beloved planet. And as you breathe in, feel that power, that warmth of the earth begin to rise through your roots. Feel it coming up and up, bringing that warm, pulsing power of the earth with you into your feet, pulling up like on a straw into your legs, into your torso. With each in-breath, feel that earth power rising up, up, through your torso, your hips, up into your solar plexus. Feel it pulling up into your heart, up into your shoulders, your throat, up into your head, and up until it is flowing out of your head. With each in-breath, feel that connection, that circuit strengthening and established. And now feel out of the crown, that crack in your skull, out of the top of your head, reach up and send a tendril of light up through your room, up through the building, out the roof, climbing up into the sky, climbing up and up, reaching for the heavens, through the sky, through the atmosphere, reaching towards the sun and the stars, and feel that sunlight and the starlight, the celestial lights flowing down, connecting and flowing down with the tendril, flowing down, down, back through the atmosphere and into your head, and feel that beautiful cosmic light, the silvery light climbing down through your head, your throat, spiraling down through your torso, your heart, into your hips, down your legs, down your feet. And feel with each breath the two sources up from the earth and down from the heavens, spiraling and mixing in your body. And now feel wherever it is that it is meeting most naturally in your center, in your body. Feel them mix and mingle. And feel all of yourselves align and be fully present. And know that you are here on all levels of your being, here and ready to do the work. And now, if you have the salt water and incense, sprinkle some on yourself, your space, and smudge yourself and your space. Release all that does not serve our immediate purpose in this time and in this space. And if you will close your eyes and turn to your inner east. Hail to you, powers of air. We call you today to come be present in this sacred rite with us. We ask you to come and bring with you the powers of clarity of mind, of discernment, and the power and strength of clarified intellect. We call to you to come and bless this rite with us today as we work to dissipate the glamour of moral outrage. The gate of the east is open. We bid you hail and welcome. Turn to your inner south. Hail to you, beautiful power of fire. We call to you to be present. Come be present and bless the sacred work today. Bring with you your gift of illumination, your power to burn away all that does not serve, your strength of purification and focused will. We ask you to be present in this work today, in this sacred rite, as we work to dissipate the glamour of moral outrage as an act of sacred service. We call to you, be present. Be present. The gate of the south is open. We bid you hail and welcome. Turn to your inner west, the place of water. Hail to you, beloved, beautiful spirits of water. We call to you today and we ask you to be present and bless this sacred rite. Come and bring with you your gifts of deep wisdom, of intuition, the deep knowing that flows from the Spirit, your gift of compassion, and empower the sacred rite today as we seek to dissipate the glamour of moral outrage as an act of spiritual service. We ask you to come. Come. The gate of the west is open. We bid you hail and welcome. Hail to you, beloved, beautiful spirits of earth. We call to you today and ask you to be a part of this sacred rite. Come to us and bring with you the ability to have strength and stability. May the forms we weave be blessed. We ask you to come and empower this rite today as we work to dissipate the glamour of moral outrage as an act of spiritual service. The gate of the north is open. We bid you hail and welcome. We are in a time that is not a time and a place that is not a place. We are in sacred space. And together we will call and invoke the holy beings of light and healing. O great beings of light, great beings of light from all traditions, great beings who support healing and who bring illumination. We call to you. We call to you and ask you to come be present. Come be present in this rite today. All of us call the beings who we work with, who are in alignment with this work. We ask you to be present and to help us as we work to dispel and dissipate the glamour of moral outrage as an act of service, to free up the attention and the capacity for us to make real change. My Lord Apollon, I ask you to come. Apollo, Apollon, I ask you to come. Athena, I ask you to come. Within your own space, call those beings with whom you interact with. The great ones are here. We bid you hail and welcome. And together, we will state our intent. We are children of the light. We will not let this danger go unanswered. We are adepts of the light. We stand together as a beacon in the darkness. We are prophets of the light and know this eternal truth. Give light and the darkness will disappear. We know that we do not stand alone. And now we will speak the Gayatri. O thou who givest substance and sustenance to the universe, from whom all things proceed, to whom all things return, unveil to us the face of the true spiritual sun, hidden by a disk of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty as we journey to thy sacred feet. And now, become aware of your blood, of the river of life that flows throughout your being and your body. Become aware of the interchange between the stream of life flowing through your form and your breath, infusing this stream with the power of air, with the power of pneuma, with every breath. Place your mind into the stream of your blood. This is the seat of the ancestors. Everything they know, all of their power is here inside you. Your blood is not mere substance. It contains life and light and knowledge. Fall through your blood until you find the light that is there. Find the light in your blood. Connect with that light and feel it moving and flowing through your body. And now with conscious awareness, bring that light up and seat it at the top of your spine in the brainstem. See the color of that light, your ancestral light, and hold it and its power there, shining, shining, shining. And now become aware of your heart. Think of someone you truly, deeply love and feel your heart opening and connecting with your love. Feel the petals of your heart opening. Think of what you want for others from love and feel how much you care. Feel how much you care for them and how your deepest wish is for their good. Let that light, the light of your personal soul, grow brighter and brighter and brighter. Feel it grow so bright and so large in your chest that it feels larger than your form can hold. Feel the light of your soul reaching out in its purest and most powerful desire to comfort, to help, to connect. And then pull that light up into your third eye behind your brow. Pull it up and feel it. Feel it in your third eye. Feel it shining and shining and shining. And now pay attention to your crown, the soft part of your head where the plates of your skull meet. And put your attention there. And then reach up out of your head, following a thread of light. Reach up and up until you find somewhere a great being. You touch a great being who is you. There is a great being outside of time and outside of space, and you are its avatar. It is you. This great being is immortal, and it stands outside of our current strife and never loses its center. Find and call to this great being that is you, and if you know the name of your highest self, you may silently speak its name. Know this is you. And when you have made conscious connection with your own God self, your own holy guardian angel, your Buddha nature, however it is that you understand it, consciously bring down as much light, as much as you can, down into your crown chakra. Bring it down and see it glowing and shining and shining and shining. And now pull the three lights together. The light from your crown of your highest self, the light from your third eye, that is your personal self, the light from your spinal stem, that is your ancestral light, and pull them together into the secret place in the center of your head, strengthening and strengthening and building the light. See it and feel it shine and shine and shine and shine. Close your eyes again and see our collective light. See the light that is being woven between us. See us as a beacon in the dark. Great sacred powers of light, guide our attention. I call on you, guide our attention. Sacred light, as we look out across this nation, guide our attention to the level of glamour, the delusion, at the level of mind in which the glamour of moral outrage that conflates feeling outraged with doing something productive. Guide our attention. We are a part of the group mind of this nation and a part of the group mind of humanity. Our work has power. Find the delusion. Find the glamour. Find the miasma like a searchlight. Look for it. Look until you see the smog. however it appears to you. And when you feel that your attention is directed like a searchlight, direct as much light as you can, shining out of your head, out of your inner eye. Shine your light and burn the miasma away. And together we will tone until the work is complete. Shine your light. Seeing the smog begin to dissipate. Shining the light, shining the light, shining the light. Seeing it dissipate. I'm going to sit in silence and let the work do its thing. The work is done, and it is well done. So mote it be. And so now, if you call beings in your own place, you need to thank them, and I will do a general thanking. Oh, spirits of love, of light, of healing, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this rite today. Thank you for blessing us with your power. Thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about us and about humanity. Thank you for your compassion and your love. Go if you must, stay if you will. We bid you hail and farewell. Thank you, Apollon and Athena. Now, if you will turn to your inner east, beautiful, bright powers of air. Thank you. Thank you for being present in this rite today. Thank you for empowering this work that we do as spiritual service. Thank you. Thank you. Go if you must. Stay if you will. The gate of the east is closed. We bid you hail and farewell. To your inner south, hail to you, bright, beautiful spirits of fire, of illumination. We thank you for being a part of this rite today. Thank you for empowering our holy work as we work to serve humanity. Thank you. Go if you must, stay if you will. The gate of the south is closed. We bid you hail and farewell. Turning to your inner west, hail to you, beloved, beautiful spirits of water. Thank you for being present in this rite today. Thank you for blessing our work with compassion, kindness, and deep intuitional understanding. Thank you. Thank you for empowering our work and for your presence. Go if you must, stay if you will. The gate of the west is closed. We bid you hail and farewell. Hail to you, beautiful spirits of earth. Thank you for blessing the forms that we weave in our magic. Thank you for your presence in this rite today. Thank you for giving us a firm foundation upon which to stand as we do this work. Thank you. Go if you must, stay if you will. The gate of the north is closed. We bid you hail and farewell. The circle is open but unbroken. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Thank you all.